Hello, my name is Vishal. Welcome to my talk. I'm a lead dev at ThoughtWorks, and as Rat was saying, one of the things I love about working at ThoughtWorks is, we write all these books and all these things, but each and every one of these books, the content was forged through real-world experience, right? Who loves an ivory tower architect? Nobody does, okay. My favorite story is like Jez Humble, when he wrote Continuous Delivery, it was at the end of a really, really, really bad project, and they were like, there's gotta be a better way. That led to some ideas, that led to experimentation, led to the book, right? So in that same spirit, for about the last year or so, I have been thinking about, looking back at my experience on the relationship between Agile, DevOps, lean transformations, these ideas that we're all reaching for, and the presence or absence of good old-fashioned great leadership in organizations, right? And my one-line pitch, if you want to leave right after this, is without the thing on the right, these will not work, right? And what I'd like to ask of you, right, is an attitude. None of what I'm about to say will probably be a surprise, so instead of like, oh, I'm going to learn something new, be a judge, be Simon Cowell, Paul Abdul, whatever. Evaluate the ideas I'm about to share with you. Tell me if that resonates, if that's wrong, or if there are holes in the thing. Again, all based on my experience. The feedback, the discussion is what I'm looking for, right? Fair enough?
Yeah.
All right, that said, I'd like to begin with two stories, right? The state of two projects when I walked into them. And to protect the innocent, I have to generalize things a little bit. So the first story is from a big corporation that was in the business of moving people and things from here to there. Was that general enough? Okay, yeah, I think so. Specifically, their e-commerce website, right? It was 3 or 4 years old. It was doing fairly well. It got about 200 or so million visitors each year. And the key metric, right, that they cared about, the conversion of shopping to buying, had stabilized to between 9.5% to 10%, right? Someone had the bright idea, as people do, like, hey, but let's build the next version of this. Why? How did the project get sold? Usual promises, right? I mean, rainbows and ice cream and unicorns. We think we can hit 15%. That's a lot of money. Right? How do we do that? Well, through better UX. We'll hit multiple channels, desktop, phone, tablet. On the internal side, we'll update to the latest tech stack. We can deploy whenever we want. So many problems will go away. Total cost of ownership will go down. People will stay, will want to come here. Just wins overall, right? So project got sold. And a long time passed. And I came in at the end, near the end of this project, and I was there in the kind of release, like war room situation, right, where they were about to go live. And everything was successful, right? They deployed, there were no errors, the website was live, people were high-fiving, great success, right? Except out in the corner, a small marketing team was sitting there looking at the numbers, the conversion numbers. After all of that stuff, all that time, all that money, numbers went down. Does that look like success? They call it a success to protect egos, and as happens, because they did go live. That's something. But they missed the business goals. They overshot the budget, overshot the schedule, as it happens. On the people side, the architecture was really highly coupled. Right? It was a pain to work in that environment. They only deployed once a month, and it took a gigantic effort to get it out the door every month. Even their daily builds, just to get what was being merged into trunk to QA, took 4 to 8 hours a day. And teams would hop, okay, today is my turn, tomorrow's your turn. It was, yeah. Success? I didn't think so. Even though, if you looked at it on the surface, they were doing all the agile things, right? I mean, You typically look at these things with the lens of technology and people and products. Those are your three criteria, right? They had a great React front end, very microservice-y API architecture on the back end. They had CI pipelines. Test coverage was really good. They followed Scrum practices. Everyone had 2-week sprints, measuring velocity, using Jira, HipChat, all that good stuff. They had 2 pizza teams, because that's a good thing to have, right? They didn't have PMs. Everyone was now called Scrum Masters. So the teams were balanced. Again, this is Agile, right? How could things go wrong with this? So really, that's one thing I want to explore. Like, what happened? Why? Second story is about a much smaller organization. And I picked this because one of the things I want to hit later on in this talk is Agile looks very different in a small organization versus a big one, right? So in this nonprofit, this organization runs bowling tournaments across the US. They run the national, they call it the open, the men's, the women's, the youth, seniors, all this stuff, right? And the e-commerce platform they had wasn't working because bowling is such a unique sport, the way it's run, the way things are sold. Like, it was just adding problems to use a generic third-party tool. And for a small like nonprofit, those problems add up, right? So they said we need a new one too. And I walked into this project about a week or two after it had already started, and I looked at the statement of work and I was like, oh, it's going to be so painful. Sales had essentially signed a fixed bid contract, so fixed scope, that had been overpromised by 3 times, and it was just a long, giant list of features, right? We want X, we want Y, we want Z. Essentially, the sales folks had heard what they were saying, hearing in the sales talks, and just written down, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you couldn't negotiate the deadline because, like, how do you push a tournament back? These tournaments run for like months. They're announced a year in advance. And I was like, can I get more people at least? No. Okay.
Vishal?
Let's figure this out. Yeah.
This wasn't work at...
This was not work at ThoughtWorks. Thank you. This was from my previous experience, yes. We don't do that, yes. Thank you, Grant, keeping me honest. 6 months passed. And this time, by the client's admission, things went really successful. They literally popped champagne, right? We went live exactly on time. We came in under budget. In fact, our progress was so good that 4 months into this 6 or 7 month effort, they released a pilot that started earning money. So the project was paying for itself before it was done. I mean, wow. Think about how many of your projects start paying for themselves, right? And you know, we went live with the men's open, and wives who had seen their husbands use this new platform were calling in and saying, hey, are we going to get the same thing when it's our turn? Right? So through reviews, however you look at it, it's still live 3-4 years down the line. They're still using it. I would think this is a success, despite the fact that 2/3 of the original scope we left on the floor, we did not implement. And yet the customer was so happy that they popped champagne. So how? Right? Those are the things I want to dive into. And I'd like to start with a little bit of theory. What we call Agile, capital A, versus what true agility might look like, right? I mean, let me go back to the basics. Why do we do projects?
To deliver business value.
To deliver business value, right? We want something, an outcome, right? That is desirable for some reason. And the promise of Agile is, instead of getting all of that outcome at the very end, maybe when it doesn't matter anymore, things have changed, you get it in small increments, right? Gives you time to start earning that value sooner, gives you time to change course if need be, right? That's the promise. And the way they say to do it is to always be delivering something. Has anyone seen this before? Yeah. So, not like the one on top, but like the one on the bottom, right? Unfortunately, most projects are like the one on top. In fact, I'm lying because it's even worse. Unfortunately, most projects are like this. Is anyone I need to explain this to, maybe? Like the best, imagine you're on day one, right? The best day on this project was day one. Hopes and dreams, like this time we're gonna get it right. Right? This time we won't make the same mistake the previous bozos did. What did they know? Life happens, time passes, and almost linearly, problems are going up, right? Tech debt, bugs, the pain of developing in that environment is going up. Stress is going up because it's like we now have like death marches going on. All the good people are leaving. And at the same time, the good things we want, like product quality, code quality, your ability to change decisions that were made like 6 months ago or a year ago, going down. People are unhappy. And for every dollar you spend, the actual value to the end user or to you is actually going down. Right? And actually, two things will happen. One of two things. Either someone will start over again, like this time, or someone will step in and say, no. We need to change something. We need a silvery looking bullet maybe, right? So, and that's when the vultures start circling. You need a different flavor of Agile maybe. Which one would you pick? I don't know. Or maybe, you know what the problem is? We haven't scaled Agile yet. Scaling is the problem. Does anyone know what this is?
Yes.
That'll solve everything, yes? Okay. It doesn't work because, again, let me first make a claim. I'm going to make a bold claim here. If Agile is not working in your organization, DevOps is not going to succeed. Whatever definition of success you want. If Agile is not working in the micro, it's not scaling down, it's not going to scale up. That's my first bold claim I'll make today. Because true agility, the way I see it at least, is really simple. Very, very, very simple, right? You observe something, you decide what to do, make a decision, and you act on it. Not easy, but simple. But observing implies someone who can observe the true reality, can see what's really going on. Decide implies the same people or someone in the vicinity can make that decision with the best facts available at the right time. Act implies you have the authority, the autonomy to act. The same people often. How often does that happen? We've heard this over and over, right? Agile is a mindset, DevOps is a culture, Lean is a way of thinking, right? But usually, in most organizations, like even the Agile implementation is a waterfall project. That we're going to transform our organization to Agile on a budget, on a timeline. How? Like, why? How would you? Yeah. So, again, being Agile is something of a cultural thing, right? It has to come from within. You make mistakes, it grows through practice. You can't mandate it from the top down. And like all infinite games, you're never really done, right? It's a continuous process. Doing, though, fits into the project style of things, like something that's sold, right? It's easier to tell everyone from the top down, the CTO, the CIO has decided that we shall be Agile now. We shall implement SAFe or whatever you want. You can get certified in 2 days. That's easier. And it's easier to scale, right? So everyone just goes for the easy thing. Let's do Agile with the results that we saw. So really, the point is the tighter you make this loop, that's how much more Agile you are, right? And to bring it back to the point I was really trying to connect the two ideas, servant leaders in organizations are the ones who tighten this loop because they have the political capital, the authority, whatever it is, to make that happen. Delegating decision-making authority down to the team. Instead of providing like orders or answers, it's like give the team the right goals, the context, the guardrails in which to make the decision, right? Bring expertise of your business, your customers. Make it safe to fail, it's okay, right? Create trust and inclusion in the team. Let the team do this You just make it safe to do so. No pun intended. The opposite of servant leaders, as I'm using it, is the command and control leaders. To them, they love making decisions. They want that. Who's doing the observing? Maybe customer service, the complaints they're getting? Or the bugs that come in, maybe? Someone else is doing the acting, and maybe every once in a while there'll be a scapegoat, and yeah. We should continue the way we are. Right? I was talking to someone who is a developer in a large organization, and they said the most frustrating thing is like the things that should get told to you. Do it this way, right? Never a chance to question or ask why or use my own creativity and stuff like that. Because of this. So, coming back to the case studies, right? I'd like to start with a simpler example. The small nonprofit organization. Because of the constraints of that project, we kind of stumbled into or just rediscovered some things that were good practices from the ground up, right? Remember this one, the story I told you? And just a hint, and a book recommendation. Everything I'm about to tell you, you can learn from these two books. Jeff Patton, a former thought worker, wrote a book called User Story Mapping. And the thing you'll get from there is, like, again, what's the first of the 5 lean principles? Like, understanding value, right? Without understanding your users, and then flowing around that value, everything else doesn't matter, right? So user story mapping is a great intro, great book to start understanding true value from a user's perspective. And that one is an interesting one. It's a negotiation book. Because one of the things that happened is when someone comes to you with like a list of features, what they've done is they've thought about its solution to their own problem, and they've given it to you like, okay, go do this. And the last thing you should do is just say, yes, ma'am, and just go do it, right? I mean, that's not agile. Order takers aren't really agile in the sense we're saying. So, actually, I'll just skip. In a slide, this was our process. For every feature request they had, we went through a user story session. Why do you need it? Who's going to use it? How many? How much revenue does it bring? What percentage, right? What's most important? Going 5 whys to understand what problem they were trying to solve in the first place when they made that ask. Then we actually use our creativity, and this wasn't just like some storyboarding session or something, like devs, UX, POs, all getting together in the same room. Again, excuse me, because everyone was in the same room, we got shared understanding, ubiquitous language for free. It was painful for the devs sometimes. I mean, you have to be in every meeting. But you get to be in every meeting, so I don't need to explain anything to you. And for, if there are architects in the room, maybe you might ask, what does right mean here? What's the right solution? Right? I mean, I've met architects for whom the beauty, the cleanliness, logical clarity of the architecture is all. Budget, not my problem. Timeline, yeah. So, to me, a great architect has to think about everything, right? It has to solve the problem, yes, it has to be clean, but it also has to fit the budget, right? It has to be simple enough that it can evolve over time. If you've read the book Evolutionary Architecture, that's the notion behind it, right? Doesn't create complexity before it's needed, doesn't burn out the team, and most importantly, it's maintainable by the team that you have today. So maybe it's, I mean, I've heard discussions where it's like, oh no, React is the answer. How many React people do you have on your team? 0. So maybe React is not the right answer, right? It has to be maintainable by the team, or train your team up to do it, right? So again, decision making in a silo just does not work. So in this kind of situation, good architecture just becomes the art of designing small experiments, right? And we just had to do this because we were so constrained. The way we approached it was like, if this is the last sprint and we run out of money, how can we still deliver value? How can we do it in a way that lets us still evolve if we're lucky enough to come back next sprint? Right? If there's a disagreement, how can we quickly right? Not in a sprint, but in a day, in a half day, run an experiment to get the better answer. Over and over and again. We had wonderful discussion in the room, right? And that was the key. So here are a few things we learned. Real world feedback, right? Like, we made a guess, people were just like getting stuck in analysis paralysis. The loudest voice in requirements gathering meetings were tending to win. So we said, we know enough after these like 2 weeks, let's make a good guess, make an MVP out there. And the value of that MVP was that it let people see something and say yes or no. Instead of theoretical, it made things real. And the flip side is, had we stopped right there, we still gave them something of value that they can take to production, right? Real world feedback. We came in as the experts. I mean, we brought in one of our more senior UX people, one of our best architects, and we had a good MVP, and we had a fancy design to show our people. In the very first user session, we walked in and we realized the average age of our user base is 55 plus. The most tech-savvy person in the room, in our testers, was like a 62-year-old retiree who was like teaching the others what to do. Everyone else was like reading instructions off of paper. Very quickly changed our opinion of what good UX is. Large fonts, bold colors became better. Right? So real world feedback. Who are your true users? And again, for product owners or whoever is doing this thing, I keep hearing this over and over. It's like, it was such a great solution, we just messed up the implementation. No. It's more important, if you are the PO, if you are the architect, to share the constraints or define the constraints of your problem really well so that everyone else who's doing the work can make good decisions, right? Gotta talk about metrics. Because everything else was fixed, this is all that we had on our metrics board. And we discussed this every single stand-up. What was the scope yesterday? What is it today? If it went up, the team had the authority to hold me accountable. If nothing was getting done in terms of our backlog, I had the authority to hold the team accountable. Again, wonderful discussions in every stand-up, daily basis. Right? How many of your stand-ups are like, well, I did something yesterday, I can't remember. Oh yeah, that's what it was, I'll finish it today, I think, hopefully. Right? Opposite. Productive conflict, recognizing that, encouraging it, is good. So again, coming back to it. We got lucky with some things, but yes, what we did, what our leaders did, what the client allowed us to do, was to tighten this feedback loop. And that's what made us successful, in my opinion. So, bold claim number 2. Whatever methodology or implementation detail you use is not as important as the fact that you have great leadership that allows you to do these things. Right? Have autonomy, experiment, ask why, change things, change decisions if it makes sense. Let's play a game of like you might be a servant leader if. Because I've been talking about this for a while. Right? And when I started looking at it, like I called it servant leader because I didn't have any better words for it. Right? At ThoughtWorks, they had a word for it. It's called courageous executive. We go looking for these people. Like a coat smell, people just know to, okay, sense that they have it or they don't have it, right? And it's an indicator of how the project might go. In the book, Accelerate, if anyone has read it, by the folks who bring out the State of DevOps report, they call them transformational leaders. By the way, the whole reason I'm doing this talk that gave me confidence is when that book came out, there were 2 whole chapters dedicated to leadership. I was like, okay, I'm not alone here. So whatever you get a sense for it, right? You've heard this before, you know what it is. These are my definitions of what it is. First and foremost, gotta be tech savvy. I mean, if you've been in the industry 10 years, like remember 10 years ago, the whole thing was like business IT alignment, like how will we get IT to align with the business? Oh my God, that's such a hard problem. Turns out, if you have a tech savvy leader, a lot of those problems just go away. How much do you want to justify paying down tech debt? How much do you want to justify keeping an up-to-date tech stack? Things like that don't appear to be valuable, right? It might actually not look like this. But like that, like, what's a statement like that doing in a shareholder letter, right? Excuse me. So, tech savvy. An experimentation mindset. As opposed to having a getting it right, or wanting to be right kind of mindset, right? So it's like, it's about small steps towards better. It's not about like, this time we will get it perfect. They welcome constraints because constraints bring innovation, right? They desire to get feedback quickly. And they use that data to make those decisions. They give teams autonomy. It needs a few characteristics. Again, this is why it's a culture thing, not a mandated thing, or not a program kind of thing, right? It needs someone to say, I don't know. Or ask about decisions that get handed down to them. Why? What are you trying to achieve? And if things go wrong, have the humility or the courage to say, you know what? Yeah, let's pivot quickly. Instead of saving our egos and just powering through. Again, from that book, from that shareholder letter. Like, many of the problems we face have no textbook solutions. So we just happily invent new approaches. That's an experimentation mindset. Tolerance for pain. And what do I mean by pain? Agile is about change, and change is inevitable, right? And change is always painful. The problem is most project or most leaders' approach to change is like getting a haircut to lose weight. It's like not really changing anything fundamental. And we in the DevOps world know better, right? What do we say? If it's difficult, do it more often. We said this about CI/CD, but it applies to a lot of these things. So there's pain in both worlds, right? If you're on a project where the code is riddled with tech debt, that's pain. If you've been doing the same thing and been stagnating for 2, 3, 5 years, that's pain too. If you just have to take orders, never get to exercise your creativity, you have to go through death marches because that will happen in a situation like this. That's pain too. We don't want that. That is pain too, right? Changing all the time. I mean, we're in IT. We have to just, with our skill sets, we have to be on a treadmill just to stay where we are today, right? But like, embracing that, right? Balancing priorities of budget, of training of people, of all those things, that's pain too, but that's pain that we want to embrace. Again, key point, control versus autonomy. This is what it looks like in a siloed organization. My job is the architecture. My job is to keep things under budget. I don't care about your tech debt. That was my idea. And at the same time, everything else is not mine, my problem. Right? They love the decision-making authority. Consequences and implementations are someone else's problem. That's what it sounds like, actually. Someone from Dallas said this, I think. So, instead of, again, you might be a great leader if, instead of micromanaging details, you reiterate the vision, right? This is what we're trying to achieve. Does your action team match that? Instead of giving exact orders, fitness functions again, right? That's the aim of providing fitness functions from the Evolutionary Architectures book. Instead of perfect, we want progress. Instead of compliance, we want progress towards outcomes. And on and on and on. People, let's talk about people. It demoralizes me when I hear some people say, yeah, my folks aren't smart enough to do that. Or, why are you bringing this idea? You're just a dev. When someone has had the same job for like 5 or 10 years. Right? Instead of this, great servant leaders invest consciously, continuously in training. And again, this is going to become like a recruiting video, but one thing I love about ThoughtWorks is like we have actual budget allocated every year to every employee. Use it the way you want it. I don't need to go get approval. I don't need to, go through hoops, right? We share what we learned, how we used our budgets. Frequent lateral career moves. We've had engineers who said, I want to learn how to be a data scientist. Okay, no problem. I want to try QA for a bit. No problem, right? And in organizations like that, there's a high influx of talent and they don't leave, right? And bringing this to a close, right, the major things, again, agility is about change and how we respond to change. So it has to start with an attitude, right? There's a great quote from the Jeff Patton book. Scope didn't change. Our understanding grew, right? So it's the job of the leader to say, every change is painful, but instead of responding like, okay, this looks painful, let's not do it, it's their job to hold that line, hold that vision until the benefits start to come, right? Steer the team through that trouble in the middle. And all of this, the last thing I want to say is managing the wobble. What's the wobble? You must have seen in your personal life as well, at any given time, 5, 6, 7 things are pulling at you. Your health, your job, family, finances, whatever, right? It's the same at work. Customers, your people want things from you, your tech debt is growing, that needs attention, there's never enough time, there's never enough budget, right? And there's 2 things about the wobble. You can never, ever, ever have enough to balance all the dimensions. Just not enough time in the world. But if you ignore one of those dimensions for too long, it'll be gone. In the same way that if you choose to ignore your physical health or your family for 2 years, don't expect that to stick around, right? Same way here. So again, the thing of small steps, the thing about like evolving towards better and not going for these gigantic programs for perfect is to balance all these things all the time. If we need to pivot, no big deal. That's the point of it, right? So instead of the either or, they have delivery and foundation teams, right? We choose sustainable pace. We plan to pay down our tech debt every sprint or every whatever it is, right? We plan investments in people. That balance is what brings about the culture. So, I pulled this quote straight out of the Accelerate book. Transformative leaders create and support a generative culture. That's what they call it. And this is especially important in large organizations because in big organizations, culture is the thing. More than any direct action you can take, any conversation you can have, like in that small organization, I could go to someone and quote unquote fix things. It doesn't work in big organizations. So let's go to that big organization, and I'll keep it short because I'm running short of time. Remember this one? Agile in name only. Well, classic case of Conway's Law. Their architecture was beautiful. They made the IT organization look exactly the same. So they had UI teams, API layer 1 teams, API layer 2 teams. Content management was a separate team. So to get any one feature done took 20 meetings. It was a coordination nightmare. When we talk about 2 pizza teams, if you look at how they do it right, it's like it's an end-to-end team that can take everything from soup to nuts, right, all the way to production. They own the entire thing. And the problem that happens is like, you can push for one change, you can try to implement something, but the organization will outlive your project and your patience. You can't do this quickly enough. So, one thing we found is that just having that courageous executive, that servant leader, is not enough. They need buy-in from their executives or their board, whatever it is. It really helps. Like, I'm kind of strange because I like existential threat, like, the crisis project, because it makes so many things super easy. The frozen middle problem, they need that to be gone. And sometimes you just need plain old luck. I mean, there's no guarantees. If I knew the answer, I'd be sitting on a beach, earning 20%. So, again, instead of going for that big win, right? Momentum. One thing even large organizations cannot argue against is something that's working, right? So building momentum, right? Building up that small wins and then slowly getting people onto your cause. We found this. We found a catalyst for change about a process that everyone hated, their release process. And we started to change that. And what we found was, again, to change this the right way, we can't just say, okay, just go to Jenkins or just do this or just implement this technology. We couldn't say, oh, just go to safe, right? It's like moving Jenga pieces. You have to do all three things at the same time. If you reorg one team to make it full stack, in the short term, you've created a deficit of UX engineers or someone on other teams. Now you have to train someone else up. Then they're ready, maybe. Maybe then they go, right? So that whole balancing act is crucial to make this kind of thing work. It is like a Jenga piece, a Jenga puzzle. And again, in large organizations, seeing how you're impacting the culture, are you changing hearts and minds? How much are you changing? Maybe measuring that is more important than, oh, we mandated that everyone is on 2-week sprints now. So any specific action, if you measure that, you're probably barking up the wrong tree, right? Find a way to measure, are people doing things differently? And have they bought on? And again, partial success is okay, right? You will never change all hearts and minds. But if you can leave things in a better place, that's okay. And we can be happy with that. So, last thought, instead of like blindly implementing something, just, I don't know, take a week, think deeply about your situation, your team, your organization, recognize what's going on, and the insights from that will be more valuable to you than any randomly implemented program. And a book recommendation, if you would, please read this book. This is amazing. These are the actual experts in the field who have data about this. Again, highly recommended. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.